Chapter 3. When the family returned home, Granny sent the children to wash up while she prepared one of her signature dishes, cornflakes and avocado sauce. The old woman was under the impression that the odd recipes she had collected on her adventures around the world were enjoyed by her whole family, but the old woman was very, very wrong. Sabrina couldn't stand her grandmother's cooking. Day after day, she had suffered through tulip root soup, Chinese beetle bread, crocodile steaks, creamed bacon with butterscotch nuggets, horseradish flavored oatmeal, and limburger pancakes. She might have been able to change the menu if she wasn't surrounded by people who would eat anything. Daphne scoffed down whatever was put in front of her, even dishes that Elvis would turn up his huge snout at, and Elvis wasn't exactly a New York Times food critic. Puck rarely looked at the food he shoved in his mouth, and that afternoon he was no different. He kept Granny rushing back to the kitchen to refill his plate. He even tried to steal a couple of rolls from Daphne, but the little girl used her fork to defend him. Puck, what is wrong with you? Granny asked, exhausted. I'm starving, the boy fairly said as he shoved a celery stalk into his mouth. I could eat a horse, and that's not a joke. I should know. I've eaten a horse. Daphne let out a little whimper. She had a fondness for ponies. Athena's the world's measure. Bet me I couldn't do it, Puck said between bites. The rat still owes me $1 million. He tried to watch when I wouldn't eat the saddle. The saddle is not technically part of the horse, is it? Everyone stared at the boy. Well, it's not, right? Mr. Candace entered the room and took a seat. Squeezing into his chair was getting harder and harder for him. Soon, Sabrina suspected he wouldn't be able to join them for dinner at all. Mr. Candace, our friend Puck has some odd symptoms. Earlier he had a crackling throat, and now he can't seem to get enough to eat. Granny said with an odd smile. Mr. Candace examined Puck closely, then took a deep sniff in Puck's direction. Interesting. Puck sat up and turned his head from the old woman to the old man. What? What's wrong? Granny rather smiled and shook her head. You'll see. Puck scowled and turned to Sabrina. He stuck out his tongue, exposing a mouthful of half-chewed food, then laughed when she turned green. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Sabrina, who had lost her appetite once again, handed the boy her plate and got up from the table. I'll get it. She crossed the room and opened the door. Standing on the porch was Morgan Le Fay. She looked distraught. I need your help, she said. I've been robbed. Sabrina sighed. I think I'm seeing the beginnings of a pattern. Ever after unnerved Sabrina, she didn't like talking animals or inanimate objects running around. Trolls gave her the willies. The memory of her encounter with Rumpelstiltskin still haunted her, but witches were the spookiest of them all. Most of the ones she had met were covered in warts and misplaced puffs of hair. They smelled funny and laughed at things that were disturbing. Even the seemingly normal-looking Glinda, who was actually quite pretty, had an odd way of talking, a sort of sing-song that grated on Sabrina's nerves. All in all, she could do without witches. Morgan Le Fay, on the other hand, was a beautiful, curvy woman with jet black hair and big, bright eyes. She was funny, smart, and a little sarcastic, which, as a New Yorker, Sabrina held in the highest regard. She also had a seductive charm that made men of all ages crazy. Uncle Jake nearly knocked over the dining room table when Granny asked him if he'd like to drive them into Morgan's house. The Enchantress lived in an apartment not far from the Metro North train station. Her place was nothing fancy. The pavement leading to the front door was crumbling. The yard was filled with mud and crabgrass, and there were several rusty bikes lying in a neglected shrub out front. Parked by the curb was the van with a giant mouse stepping onto a mousetrap on top. The words "Rodent Wranglers" were painted on the van's doors. The family followed Morgan as she sashayed to her front door. Waiting there were half a dozen men who quickly removed their hats, straightened their hair, and sucked in their pot bellies when they spotted her. Morgan, one of the men said, I fixed that leaky sink. Oh, Stephen, you're a doll, Morgan said as she reached up and kissed the man on the cheek. I only caught about it yesterday. Morgan, I've gone to the hardware store and picked up all the paint for the living room, another man said proudly, and as if he had just won a gold medal in the Olympics. Morgan, I'll be here bright and early tomorrow to change your oil. Another man said, Morgan, I put in a new hot water tank for you. Morgan, I fixed that crooked mirror in your bathroom. Morgan, I speckled that hole in the kitchen ceiling. Oh, boys, you really must let me pay you something for all the hard work you are doing, she purred. Absolutely not, the man cried, then turned and shot one another angry, jealous looks. Boys, I'm so happy you came by, but I have some guests right now, the beautiful witch said. The men looked as if they had waited in line all day to ride the carousel, only to hear the fair was closing for the night. They threw out a few half-hearted of courses and promised to return at a time that was more convenient for Morgan. She thanked them all and gave each a hug. The men strutted to the parking lot as if they just won the lottery. Moments later, they were arguing. A second after that, they were all in one big fist fight. Boys will be boys, Morgan said with an embarrassed smile. She unlocked her apartment door and led the group inside, where Sabrina's ears were assaulted by a terrific wreck of rockets, machine guns, and helicopters. She could actually feel the floor rumbling beneath her shoes from the volume. She wondered if she had just stepped onto a battlefield until she noticed a very pale and pudgy young man playing the most violent video game she had ever seen. The man looked to be in his late 20s, though his 3-day beard, paunchy belly, and his tired eyes made him seem much older. He wore a ratty t-shirt that read, "One ring to rule them all." He was surrounded by delivery pizza boxes and hamburger wrappers. If he noticed that anyone had entered the room, he had made no sign of it. "Mordred," Morgan said sharply, "we have company." "I see them," he said without turning his head. "Well, turn off your game and say hello." Mom, I'm about to beat the level 15 boss. Do you have any idea how many experience points I can get?" "Fine, if you don't want to socialize and act like an adult, then go to your room and clean up. I have to vacuum there and you've got your dolls all over the place." Mordred looked over at his mother with a mother's rage in his face. His pupils vanished and his eyes turned pure white and radiated energy. "They're not dolls, they're action figures." He leaped up from the couch and turned off his game. "The exterminator is in the bathroom," he snapped, as he marched into a room and slammed the door behind him. "I'm sorry," Morgan said. "Mordred is a bit geeky," Uncle Jake interrupted. "Nerdy?" Sabrina offered. Mucho lima, Daphne added. "I was going to say aimless," the witch replied. "I know he's a bit old to be living at home with his mom, but he's had a difficult time holding a job. He's worked at Wendy's, Taco Bell, and Burger King, but always ends the same way. He challenges his manager to combat, takes over the restaurant, and enslaves his co-workers. Then it's back to video games." "We'd like to get right down to business if possible," Granny said while batting an eyelash. "You told us you have been robbed. What was taken?" "The wonder clock," Morgan Lefay answered as she walked around the room picking up empty French fry boxes. "No way!" Uncle Jake exclaimed. What's the wonder clock?" Sabrina asked. Her father had kept her and Daphne away from fairy tale stories when they were little, trying to protect them. Unfortunately, it put the Grimm sisters at a disadvantage in Fairyport Landing. It seemed as if they hardly knew anything about fairy tales. Lately, the girls had made a serious effort to read the original tales as part of their training, but Sabrina hadn't come across the wonder clock. "Howard Pyle, Rosabud's Liebling? The story goes that it was found in the attic of Father Time," Granny explained, and turned her attention back to Morgan. I was under the impression the 1 o'clock was a myth. So is
là chạy được không mà họ nhớ lại cảm giác.
his jacket was sewn with extra pockets where he kept enchanted.
Sống được
Granny asked. In what way? Pa wrote that its only function was to tell stories when the clock struck the hour. Morgan Le Fay shuffled her feet uncomfortably. Well, it does something else. Uncle Jake grinned eagerly. What? It's kind of a time machine. Sabrina laughed. She never knew Morgan had such a great sense of humor. No, really, Morgan said. It lets a person go 12 hours into the past. What good is that? Daphne wondered. It comes in very handy when you will accidentally say yes to 2 dates on the same night, the beautiful witch said. Morgan, how long has the clock been missing? Granny asked. I'm not sure, the witch replied. I came home from the party and went straight to bed. It was on the kitchen table when I turned off the lights. This morning it was gone. And you didn't hear anything? Granny asked. Nothing. The front door was wide open when I woke up, but I know I locked it. What about Mordred? Uncle Jake asked. Could he have taken it? No, Morgan said. He's very honest. He says he has no idea what happened to the clock, and I believe him. Just then, a fat orange creature no more than a foot tall stepped out of the bathroom. It was wearing green camouflage pants, a green shirt, an army helmet, dog tags, and heavy boots. At first glance, it looked like a dressed-up pet, but Sabrina realized it was much more. Walking erect on its hind legs, it seemed just as startled to see Sabrina as she was to see it. It shouted, "Incoming!" and dove behind the couch. Boots, it's okay, the Morgan Le Fay said, trying to calm the cat down. It's around a Grimm and her family. The cat peeked its head from around the couch. He looked nervous and his whiskers were frantically twitching. You scared the bejesus out of me, Boots said in a thick New Jersey accent. I could have had a nervous breakdown. You gotta warn a guy. I'm a veteran. I've seen terrible things. Makes a guy jumpy. So did you say anything? Morgan asked. Well, Miss Le Fay, I've got good news and bad news, Boots said. I'll start with the bad news. You have mice. Ugh, Morgan groaned. She crossed the room to her handbag and showed it to the cat. I knew it. One of them chewed through my purse. She reached into the bag and poked a finger into a small hole near the bottom. What's the good news? There is no good news. I just thought it might help to have some hope. My advice is to pack your things, burn this place to the ground, and start somewhere new. You want her to abandon her home because she has a mouse? Sabrina said incredulously. It's the only chance you have. There's nothing you can do to stop vermin. They just keep coming and coming and coming, haunting your dreams, eating your cereal. Oh, the horror! The cat gazed vacantly, as if trapped inside a troubling memory. What's vermin mean? Daphne whispered. Vermin are pests like rats, mice, and cockroaches, Sabrina explained. Daphne's face contorted with disgust. Gross! I'm going to have to check the basement to make sure you don't have a nest, Boots said, but Sabrina could see he was visibly trembling. Sabrina tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. We saw a mouse hole at Baba Yaga's house, she reminded her. Granny winked at Sabrina and turned to Boots. A mouse, you say? Mind if we take a look? What about my missing clock? Morgan asked. That seems to be the end of this video. I'll see you later. Goodbye.